Where there's extreme environmental degradation, there is extreme human exploitation. The overlap is pure. It is 100%.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Alberto Rosende, your host and CEO of M2I Global, a critical minerals supply chain company, and this is the Minerals Metals Initiative, a podcast exploring the transformation of the critical minerals supply chain as we race for global resilience, from mineral extraction and refinement to policy and innovation. Join us each episode as we examine a different aspect of the urgent push to modernize, diversify, and de-risk the world's critical minerals supply chain. And joining us today is Mark Wexler. Mark is an entrepreneur and branding expert who has co-founded ventures that combine purpose-driven storytelling with market strategy to build impactful, socially responsible brands that prioritize financial sustainability and social good. In 2006, he co-founded Not for Sale, a global organization dedicated to ending modern-day slavery and exploitation. Operating in 12 countries globally, Not for Sale addresses the root causes of human trafficking and provides sustainable solutions to prevent it. By offering education, fair wage employment, and support services, Not for Sale works to break the cycle of exploitation and provide individuals with the tools to build a better future for themselves. So Mark, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me out. Great to be here with you.
And somebody might be saying, what does Not for Sale have to do with the critical minerals space? But we're going to get to that. But why don't you give us a little bit of background as to who you are, what you've been doing for the last 20 years or so as it applies to Not for Sale?
Yeah, Al, it's been a wild and crazy ride, and I'm grateful for you having me to share about it. And the link to critical minerals and the onshoring of critical minerals is actually really, really clear. So I'm excited to go through a bit of that walk and share a bit with the people who are listening and watching about the importance of doing critical minerals and doing it really, really well, which we can do. So my personal background, about the late 90s was my first couple of years in Northern California. And I was shocked to pick up a newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle, and on the front page, there was this article about a case of human trafficking. I didn't know what human trafficking was. I was not a term I was familiar with. And here I thought something like forced labor and human trafficking or modern day slavery was something of the past, and was shocked to learn that no, in fact, this was something that was happening right there in the San Francisco Bay Area and had been happening over an 8-year period. It turns out that a restaurant there in Northern California was the front of human trafficking ring that brought over 550 women and girls from the Bangalore region of India. And the restaurant was the legal front. And those legal papers were used to get, again, mostly young women and girls into California. And the restaurant was the initial front of the human trafficking ring, but they were forced to work in the fruits and vegetable fields of California, work as a domestic in homes and in hotels and motels, doing cleaning. They were forced into the commercial sex trade. You name it, they were forced into it. And I wish I could tell you that the reason why this case was brought to light was that there was a really upstanding citizen like you or I who went to the restaurant and had the lens to understand what they were seeing. If you went to the restaurant, you just thought that might be a family member or someone who was connected to the community, when in reality, at the end of the day, those women were actually taken from the restaurant in vans and then locked into apartment buildings around, in this case, the East Bay. One day there was a gas leak, and there were 2 young women who were in this particular apartment building, and one of them passed away from the gas leak. And the traffickers showed up, and instead of helping or getting the young women to a hospital, they rolled the young woman who had passed away up in a rug, and they were shoving her body in the back of a truck when a neighbor drove by. And the neighbor stopped the car and it was like, what is going on? This is insane. I can't believe this is happening. And again, in my Northern California community, and she called the cops. She called the police. But because the human traffickers were actually seen as upstanding citizens in the community, the cops just let it go. They had shoved the body in, they had shut it, and they didn't go and actually like look in the car, and they drove off. I took that neighbor continuing to pester and be like, there was something completely wrong, not okay, and you know, I kind of think about my life, and I assume this neighbor who did this too, she would not let that go. And for the last 20 plus years since then, I feel like it's been kind of pulling the thread of like, how does that happen? Why does that happen? And how can we, as a global community, step up to stop it? And as you really get to the core of how and why something like as egregious as forced labor and human trafficking happens, you naturally come across mining. You just do. And I can share a bit about our path, like moving from Northern California to a place like Thailand and then to Peru, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I just want to take you a step back because
Yep.
many of us read the paper or would have read the paper
Right.
and just said, boy, that's awful. And just,
Yeah.
move on with your day. But what was it that unnerved you so much to lead you to action? And what was it that you thought you could do?
So for me, I would say that it was an amalgamation of things. One was that moment, the fact that it was just like in our community and in our backyard, that couldn't let that go. Couldn't let go that reality that this was something that was just happening literally just next door. My home is less than a mile from that restaurant, to give full disclosure. It's truly the fact that it was something that felt so hidden and so historical. And what led to really the next steps was, again, just trying to learn. I would say there's one other element here that we haven't hit on. It's anger.
Okay. Okay.
There was some intense anger that something like that could happen. And I think that depends on how you use that anger.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think for most people that can actually like detract, or it allows you to put up your defenses and then not do anything.
Right.
Whereas for me and for my fellow co-founder of Not for Sale, I really do think that anger, it leads us forward. It becomes like a fuel.
It became a catalyst.
It becomes a catalyst without a doubt. And the first step from there was just to learn more about this crime, like literally follow the path of where some of those young women came from. Try to understand the underlying context and the community context, which then led us to a place like Thailand, where we met a woman who had at the time rescued 27 kids, had no plan. We had come across a restaurant, and the thankfully eventually the law enforcement and then the judicial system got involved. Whereas this situation in Thailand, this woman had rescued 27 kids, many of them out of horrific situations of forced labor and also the commercial sex trade. She had taken that step, and she had been gifted land in northern Thailand, but she had no housing, no facilities. She was going around to the local monks and asking the monks for alms, for food, so she could feed the kids. And it was just, then it was an inspiration from her, like that first step of just trying to understand the underlying context of how modern day slavery could still be happening today, and then coming across people who were already a part of this fight. There's a global movement that we like to call abolitionists, people who are actually a part of a modern day movement who are trying to stop this crime. And she became then the next layer of inspiration. And I think that's part of it. It's finding kindred spirits along the way, finding people who you can count as part of your kind of global family of people who are want to participate in this movement together. Which honestly, I feel with you, Al, and the team at M2I. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but to foreshadow a little bit.
Right.
So we met this incredible woman in northern Thailand. She became the next layer of catalysts. Like, okay, well, how do we help her? How do we build one house for her? And honestly, that was the first activity of Not for Sale. And that's really what we thought the only thing Not for Sale would do. We would just build one house for one woman in Thailand and her 27 kids. But she was too good at her job. And by the time we built the first home, she had close to 80 kids. We're like, oh my gosh, we need to continue to do this. We need to raise more funds. And that's really where Not for Sale went from a personal desire to understand. And then it became something that was more active, became more codified. Then we started to put we literally went and got the 501c3 status so we could raise funds and give a tax break to people who engaged with Not for Sale, and then help this woman in northern Thailand named Krunam. And that is Not for Sale's first project. But it was meant to just start as one home for 27 kids and one woman to help those kids.
How did then all of this effort, obviously you observed, you got angry, it catalyzed motion in you. You decided, I need to understand more. You decided to help this one person that kind of snowballed into, okay, 501c3, let's see if we can get more funds. How did that take you? Of course, that's all almost 20 years ago. How did all that take you into understanding mining and its impact?
It's actually the next step in the story, so it's perfect. Our next country that we went to, and next form of forced labor and human trafficking that we went to examine and understand further was in Peru. When we went, it was a very similar situation in Lima to what we had experienced in northern Thailand. In Lima, the most prevalent forms of forced labor are forced begging rings, forced domestics working in homes, and then also the commercial sex trade. And so a lot of these kids had come out of those situations. But when we went down and committed to work with her and engage with her in Lima, it didn't take a genius to realize that a majority of those kids weren't from Lima. The vast majority of those kids were from the Peruvian Amazon. Indeed, most of them were from a region of the Peruvian Amazon called Madre de Dios. And normally, when you come from a place like the United States and you go to an indigenous community, for example, like there in Madre de Dios, typically you would go there and you're there on holiday, or you're there to try to transact. You're trying to actually extract from the Amazon with some kind of business mindset. And we were able to show up and engage those indigenous communities from a very unique position where we showed up where we had literally been helping their kids,
right?
Which unlocked relationship, which meant that we had an opportunity to engage in a way that was not from a purely kind of extractive, either from a holiday, like I'm there on vacation perspective.
It wasn't transactional. It wasn't transactional.
It was not transactional. It was not transactional. And, again, doesn't take a genius to through building those relationships to get the feedback from what we all know. We know that environmental degradation in places like the Amazon rainforest, or in the second largest rainforest in the world in Central Africa, and places like the Congo, where there's extreme environmental degradation, there is extreme human exploitation. The overlap is pure. It is 100%. In fact, sadly, the people who are participating in the environmental destruction of the rainforest,
contributing to that degradation,
contributing to the destruction. Yes. Many of them are actually doing it because they are forced to do so. So the communities, even in the Amazon, the parents of those kids who were being trafficked, those parents were actually indentured servitude. They had debts that were layered on top of them. They just thought that was the way life was, right? They thought, like, life is hard. I'm going to go out, I'm going to collect things like Brazil nuts, but to do so, I need a loan so I can keep life going. I'll go out and I'll collect these Brazil nuts, but oddly, I can never pay this debt off, you know? The way the loan is structured, I'll never be able to break the shackles of debt. When in reality, it was indentured servitude, what the communities were faced with. So there was people who were forced into indentured servitude to go out, collect Brazil nuts, and when they couldn't pay off the Brazil nut debt, they were forced to go into illegal gold mining, which was then further, because they used mercury in the waterways, which was further degrading the waterways. So people who were living off the rainforest and living off the fish, they couldn't live off that anymore because they were contaminated with mercury. So you see this horrible negative spiral where you have this interlocking of forced labor and an extreme environmental degradation. And that it was at that point in time where we first were introduced to the incredible harm that something like illegal gold mining in the Amazon was having, not only on the planet, but also the people who are living there. And, I think it's kind of ironic. Sometimes we look at places like the Amazon or other rainforests, and we just kind of see the environment. Well, there are people living there, right? And if we could create economic stability, look at this as from a systemic perspective, that we could transform the communities in partnership with the indigenous people there, and also begin to protect the Amazon because they were interlinked in terms of their livelihood. If I were to summarize this, Al, this is a great example of where good can be the enemy of great. I think it's a good thing that in the last 20 years, Not for Sale has helped close to 500,000 individuals. I think that is a good thing.
That's amazing.
I don't think it's a great thing, though. This might sound weird.
All right.
I don't. If you think on a systemic level, so the good is like pulling people out, getting people out of horrific situations.
Right.
If you can work yourself upstream and you can begin to address the systemic problem at that level. So, for example, the supply chain of minerals and metals, right? If you could address and improve the supply chain of minerals and metals by, let's say, 0.01%, I guarantee you there would be more positive impact on the planet for both people and planet. And that, to me, that would be great. And it would also help fuel the good.
Right.
And that's the way we think about how you create great impact on people and planet, while also linking it to the good.
Let me ask you then, because I know that you recently came back from Africa, where you visited another community of impacted indigenous people, if you will, people from the area, because of the conflict that is currently happening over the border from where you were, based on some of the mining practices that are there. And so I would like to take you there, because that particular country that we would mention, which is the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, obviously is the seat of an awful lot of mineral resources. The mineral resources, or resources in general, can bring a lot of economic development. It can bring workforce development. It can raise the tide where all boats begin to rise. But because of the conflict and the abuses that are taking place, they haven't been able to do that. So I know that we're still talking about illegal or irresponsible mining, or wrongly obtained material and inject it into the right flow. And so I'm going to tear that apart a little bit, but I'd like you to give us some background there and then talk about where it should take us in terms of responsible mining, mining with the conscious, mining with the community and the planet, like you say, planet and people in mind.
Let's back up, Al. I think it's really important to kind of start where did this conflict start? I mean, I think this might shock a lot of people, but this conflict goes back to 1994, and this conflict goes back to the genocide that the Hutus perpetrated against the Tutsis in Rwanda. After the 100-day genocide in 1994, many of the Tutsis fled into the DRC. And I think just like something like slavery, like historical slavery, we thought there was a switch got flicked and it was done. And we can talk about that as history. I think the world kind of viewed, the genocide ended in 1994 and it was done. I would argue that the genocide is still going on. I would say that it's still happening today, but just in a different, more covert manner. And it is, quite frankly, it's fueled by a mineral crisis. I think it's important to highlight some of the history here so we can kind of level set as to why we are where we are today. The genocide in 94, the Tutsis fled into the DRC. The Hutus then went into the DRC. For them, the genocide and the war was not over. There was the first Congo War from in 1996 to 1997. And then there was a second Congo War from August of 1998 to 2003. And the low-end estimated number of people murdered from 1996 to 2003 is 6 million. That's the low-end estimate. The genocide in Rwanda, the estimates already were between 800,000 to 1 million, right? I think it's really important to put a face to the reality in the Congo, because it's kind of easy to be like, it's just a lot of numbers, right? 6 million people. Yeah, it's bad. It's just kind of, again, it's easy to switch it off. And this is why it's important. And it's the dichotomy for me. It's like that good work we do is super important because those are real people, right?
It changes the perspective of a statistic on a page to the tragedy that one individual suffers.
This has just been a slow rolling burn that has continued to happen in the Congo since then. What was happening previous to 1994 was mostly legal forms of mining. Since 1994, that has not been the case because the ongoing conflict has been about underneath all of it has been about extracting these minerals and metals, and then using the local, mostly indigenous and Tutsi population to go do that extraction under the form of modern day slavery and forced labor. So, you asked at the beginning, how do we get here? It is so inextricably linked that when you pull that thread of forced labor from that restaurant in Northern California, the most extreme, egregious forms of forced labor that happening in the world today happen on mine sites. And they happen in places where there is no governance structure. This is really important. So there's, again, another foreshadow to thinking about onshoring or domestic systems of extraction here in the United States or in Australia or other or friendly countries. Where there is not some form of recourse or justice system, you cannot fight forced labor. You can't. You have to build those systems. In fact, when we first engaged the indigenous communities back in the Amazon rainforest in Madre de Dios, one of the major issues, again, was the lack of ability to have recourse. And over the last 20 years, we, in addition to helping reverse the tide of forced labor there, which we've effectively stopped all forced labor and are protecting 755 square miles of rainforest, which is larger than Greater London. We built a local indigenous governance platform where people are voted in. And the reason for that, the importance of that, is so that if there are issues like this, that they have recourse. And this can be replicated on local levels all around the world. In fact, we're doing this in Vietnam as well. But having recourse is critical. And right now, in a place like Eastern Congo, sadly, there's not a judicial system set up to have recourse.
Right.
There was a major flare up of this ongoing war or genocide in January of this year.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of that was driven by M23, which is a Rwandan-backed.
But the paramilitary group, the M23, which is based on March 23rd, right, of 2000, and whenever they signed that peace treaty that obviously they didn't implement appropriately, they claim to be backed by the Rwandan government. Obviously, the Rwandan government disavows that, right, at this point.
Correct. Yeah, the Rwanda government wants a very long arm from that, right? They don't want to say that they have any connection to it. Here's the fact that really is injurious to that claim. Rwanda as a country is one of the world's largest exporters of coltan. There's no coltan in Rwanda.
Right.
Coltan is in Eastern Congo. So how can the Rwandan government claim that doesn't have any kind of connection at all to M23 if indeed they are the largest exporter in the world of coltan?
Right. And coltan, for those that don't know, is really the source of tantalum. It's what processes and refines into tantalum, which is used in that phone that you have. It's in that TV monitor that we're looking at, and is in many modern daily use products that we all need and want. And so the drive and the demand for tantalum continues to exist. But interestingly enough, that although Rwanda is one of the largest exporters of coltan, they don't produce any of it organically. Where does it come from?
Exactly. Well, it's coming across the border illicitly, and whether there's a written legal agreement between M23, the militia group, and the government, there probably is not. That is just the fact. The fact is it's coming out through Rwanda and then ending up in places like China for refinement, and then it's ending up in our phones and our computers and any of our electronics.
So it becomes an apparent requirement to be able to understand your supply chain if you're involved in the manufacture or in any part of the industrial process that leads to a finished good that is sold. You need to know that supply chain all the way back to the source of the material, right? And I know that 100%. We at M2I, we talk about the tracking and tracing. We know that the US government has put in requirements to be able to understand and know provenance of material through the industrial process. And I know that places like the UK, the London Metal Exchange, they mandate any material that comes into their country to be able to be known to the source, right? You have to know the source, and they even delist providers of those materials. And I know that the conflict materials that they talk about are the 3 TGs, tantalum being one of the T's, right? The others, tin and tungsten, and then gold. But so we're talking about one of the major focal points of one of the major materials that needs to be known to the source, yet it continues to be smuggled through illegal mining, coerced mining.
Yes, and I constantly argue with myself. I mentioned earlier, I was like, the good can be the enemy of great. That is true when it comes to something like this, like where we go, the impact we could have by improving the practices of the minerals and metals coming out of a place like the Congo or anywhere in the world, for that matter,
right?
Anywhere. That if you improve it just by the slightest amount, the amplified impact you will have is incredible. However, this is where I argue with myself, is like that work with individuals becomes that ongoing fuel. Both it can be the anger and it also can be the positive, but also it's really important because it fuels the knowledge learning that we have to continue to have in any space that we're in, right?
Because at the end of the day, if those minerals would be stopped from entering into the marketplace, they would lose their value.
Yeah, they would.
Right? Because the incentive is that the smuggling is successful, the minerals are finding their way into the marketplace, and the money is flowing back to those that are controlling that piece of the conflict. And so you've got to break that chain. So when you look at things like the Mineral Security Partnership that was established, that I know the administration is still putting their hands around or their arms around how the State Department is going to continue to push that forward amongst all of the initiatives that they have in the critical mineral space. What would be the pillars of those practices that you would suggest that we take on? So I'd just like to hear it from you based on what you've seen and what's in the realm of the possible.
No, I think of it as like strands of a rope, and then as you pull the rope, it gets taut, right? And I view there's three important strands, and you touched on the first two: it's people, planet, and then the third one to me is supply chain and supply chain practice. The supply chain, when working healthy, is perhaps the world's most important incentivization machine, right?
Right.
Because it is what interconnects us from us where we're sitting, the tools that we're using to communicate, the phones that we use, and then it literally connects us. Those supply chain practices, if we're able to build the proper practices and procedures and expectations inside the supply chain practice, as we pull that taunt, we don't get devastation on the far end.
Right.
We actually get community improvement, and we've seen this play out again in the Peruvian Amazon, where we've been able to reverse the tide of this. It's on a different scale. We're talking about 10,000 people in the region where we're in the Peruvian Amazon. But when we were able to go in and work with local business leaders as well as local indigenous communities to instill the types of expectations that we have in the global marketplace about the extraction practices around things like labor practice. Like, for example, what we did is help instill literally the fair trade practices. And we went in and did trainings around that. And there are definitely systems and practices that we can instill in the mining industry to make sure that the labor practices that are being practiced in these communities are actually helping build up the local economic structure and systems, helping create positive impact on the environment. I think when most people think of mining, they go, oh, you go in, you smash and you grab, right? When I think we can instill and grow the technological advancements in mining as well, which we have seen. Like we're working in, which we have seen in practice in Australia through M2I and your partners there, where you're utilizing the financial gains of working with a healthy indigenous community to actually implement technologies that are remediating past wrongs that happened on that land. So you're actually cleaning the water while you're doing it. So to me, it's the instilling the training around how you actually do a labor practice. It's integrating technologies and new technologies and advancing those technologies on the environmental side, so we can remediate the previous wrongs that have happened within the mining industry and actually clean water tables and actually improve the lands that mining has happened on previously, and then also make sure that there's new mining that's happening, that we're already using those advanced technologies. And then the third thing is making sure that those incentives are enforcing those first two, right? So that we're saying these are the expectations that if you're going to participate, let's say, or gain access to the U.S. marketplace, our expectations are that you are deploying these training practices on the ground, and you have these types of oversight to make sure that there isn't something as egregious as forced labor, and that you're instilling these types of, or using these types of technologies that are remediating and stopping any type of environmental degradation before it can even happen.
Right.
So that's how I have come to see it. It's that kind of triple pronged approach within the supply chain rope, if you will.
Absolutely. Access to the supply chain means that you have to adhere to certain practices that are established and agreed to. You have to make sure that your plan to remediate and to take care of the land that you're mining and extracting critical minerals from is maintained and sustained in a responsible way throughout the life of the practice of mining on that land, and that there is a plan to restore the land at the end of the life cycle of the mine to what it was before, utilizing those technologies continually as you're processing to continue to reclaim and make sure that you're purifying or cleaning the water, as well as the piece on labor practices, forced labor, child labor, all of those kinds of practices that we're so used to in the West have to be applied everywhere we go.
100%. Al, a couple of years ago, Not for Sale had a strategic partnership with Safeway, one of the nation's largest grocery chains. And the head of supply chain for Safeway invited me to keynote one of the largest conferences on supply chain practice. And he wanted to introduce the reality of human trafficking and forced labor within supply chains. And so I went to Orlando with him. And again, I think it's really important to underscore, and this was the challenge that I put out during the talk, was that the stewards of supply chain in our world today, and especially those in the room that day, who, again, this was the U.S. military, this was the 50 largest supply chains in the United States. That half a cent choice that you make, and I know it's in some cases even less than that. It's some fractional element choice you make within your supply chain is literally the difference between forced labor and healthy labor. The room went into a hush, but it's true. It is so true. And I think we have a broken history where the human rights and the environmental rights folks have always been like, just don't do it. Just stop it. It's like, it's so fine. There's a finality to it.
Yeah.
Where it's, I truly hope that the future of change making, if you will, for both the human rights and environmental rights, and also in the business space, in the business world, that we can come closer together. And it's more about the points within those incentive chains that link us around the world, and finding the points along them that are problematic and then addressing it. I hope that then our partnership becomes an example of how you pragmatically identify those problem points, because like we've already mentioned, like where those problem points are, I guarantee you those are opportunity points too.
Yeah, no, as the great Stoics say, that the obstacle is the way. So you have to look at those opportunities, right? And those opportunities, when they're constrained, all it does is it gives you guardrails for you to operate within to seek those solutions. So I think that, our partnership is built on that. Our partnership is to look for those solution sets, to look for those opportunities, and always continue to propagate those responsible practices at the people, the planet level, and at all levels, right? So that's really, really important for us going forward. That's the whole reason that our partnership continues to thrive. And I really look forward to seeing where we continue to make a difference.
We can and we must utilize those solution sets around technology, around labor practices, engaging with indigenous communities and First Nation communities, even here in the United States. And we need to find ways to incentivize those relationships in a healthy way where we're building each other up instead of tearing each other down.
Right.
And I look forward to doing that with you, Al, and I look forward to doing that with you, M2I.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Mark Wexler, the co-founder and CEO of Not for Sale. Thanks for spending this afternoon with us, and I look forward to our continued relationship. Thanks again, Mark. And to everyone who listened or watched this episode, thank you for joining us. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to keep enjoying the Minerals and Metals Initiative.